This is the inner city. Across America, it has taken a beating. Across America, people are searching for strategies to revitalize neighborhoods that were once vibrant. This is Old North St. Louis, a historic and architectural hidden treasure located just north of downtown St. Louis. 50 years ago, this was a crowded and active place with a diverse population. But like many city neighborhoods, Old North St. Louis experienced the urban decay of the 1960s and 1970s. Residents moved out or passed on, and few were interested in maintaining these beautiful but endangered homes. As many of these historic structures fell beneath the wrecking ball, it seemed that this community might disappear. Today, the picture looks brighter. There is rebuilding. People are moving into the neighborhood. Old homes are being saved. New homes are being built. Old North St. Louis is on the rebound, and the key to its success is a renewed appreciation and aggressive promotion of the neighborhood's deep, rich history. The independent village of North St. Louis was founded in 1816 by a group of wealthy speculators who envisioned a town that would rival and eventually overtake the neighboring city of St. Louis. The planners laid out the streets of their settlement in a grid pattern that connected the community to the river. St. Louis had its Market Street to convey freight from the waterfront to the town. North St. Louis would call its main thoroughfare Market Street as well. But trade was not the only aspect of life that the founders had in mind. They laid out 3 circles a mile west of the river, designated for the purposes of education, leisure, and worship. Those uses remain in effect to this day. In 1841, the town was annexed by the city of St. Louis. Still, it retained its independent identity and its attachment to the river. Floating rafts of white pine were hauled from the Mississippi, cut at local sawmills, and then crafted into furniture at nearby factories. North St. Louis became the woodworking center of the rapidly growing metropolis. The thriving industrial economy attracted a steady stream of migrants from nearby farms and faraway countries, Germany, Ireland, and by the turn of the century, Poland, Russia, and Italy. The people of North St. Louis came from all over the world in search of a brighter future. But the early settlers did not always appreciate the past. The numerous Indian mounds in the area that gave St. Louis the nickname Mound City were destroyed in the name of progress. The mounds were built centuries earlier by an advanced Indian civilization that flourished on both sides of the Mississippi River. By the time the Europeans arrived, these Indians had disappeared, having been replaced by other tribes. The massive burial mounds remained, however, but not for long. Soon there were roads to pave and factories to build, and so the mounds came down. Today, the forces of destruction still do battle with the forces of preservation on the north side of St. Louis, but the tide has turned. Today, history is seen not as an enemy of progress, but as an ally in the effort to revitalize the inner city. Although many remnants of the past have disappeared, much of the community's history still lives. It lingers in the buildings, it survives in the memories of old-timers, and it breathes new life into the aspirations of those who are rebuilding for the future. Ice cream. St. Louisans love it, and everyone has their opinion on who makes it best. But undisputably, there is only one malt shop that takes you back in time. Crown Candy has occupied the corner of St. Louis Avenue and 14th Street for nearly a century. Andy Karanzif, along with his 2 brothers, are third-generation owners. Every Tuesday morning, you can find Andy in the back kitchen making fresh batches of chocolate chip, black walnut, and other flavored ice creams, just as his father and grandfather did years ago.
Crown Candy opened in 1913. My grandfather bought the business, and he was born in Macedonia, northern Greece. He was very old school. I mean, he was work, work, work. You know, I mean, he put his, his whole life into this business. I mean, this is all he did. He lived above the restaurant from the get-go. Once he had a couple kids, they moved around a little bit, but they always stayed right in the neighborhood. But he was all about, always worked, my dad said. And that's where my father got it from, because when I was younger, my dad worked 6 days a week, 13 hours a day. And he always wanted to work hard, so we had a better life. You had confectionaries and ice cream parlors all over the place in this area. So, you were pretty much limited to who you drew from. We were lucky because right across the street was the old 14th Street shopping district. So you had retail business over there. So this was kind of a prime location. Because I always hear stories from my customers that come in when they were little, their parents brought them down here to the 14th Street Mall to do their shopping, whether it was for Christmas or Easter or Valentine's or whatever. And then the treat was to come down to Crown's and get a banana split or an ice cream cone. Everybody comes in here and they're in awe sometimes. Just to look on, I can always tell a first-time person in here because their face is just like, wow, look at all this stuff. Kids are amazed. They've never seen a phone booth before. We've got the old wooden phone booth out there. They're just fascinated by it. We are an old-time ice cream store, an old-time, candy, confectionery. So, we're the real deal. We're not new trying to look old. We are old.
Crown Candy is not the only old business in town. A few blocks south stands Mark's Hardware Store, where customers still gather around the old wood-burning stove to shoot the breeze and debate local politics.
Business was begun many years ago, 128 years ago. When one of the older brothers got set up in here, and the youngest one, my great-grandfather, came along with it after he got out of Webster School. He came up here and started working in the business and carried along. And his son did likewise.
Throughout Old North St. Louis, one finds relics of a bygone age that provide a glimpse into how life was once lived. There's the Melanphy Emigrant Home, which provided short-term lodging for needy immigrants in the 1860s. The church building on the corner of 14th and Howard Streets that burst with German songs when it housed the North St. Louis Singing Society. And the public bathhouse, which provided hot showers for the thousands of families that lacked indoor plumbing in their homes. Then there are the ordinary houses that date back to the days when North St. Louis was a crowded and flourishing neighborhood. In 1983, Mimi Stiritz wrote the nomination that placed Old North St. Louis on the National Register of Historic Districts. She knows as much as anyone about the neighborhood's architectural history.
One of the things that makes Old North St. Louis special architecturally is the great concentration of what I call early Greek Revival vernacular housing, like the row that we see across here, which has been freshened up with white paint, but underneath that white paint is traditional St. Louis handmade red brick, which sometimes was originally painted red. And looking at the cornice line, this very simple brick trim, which is called a dental course, is characteristic of these early buildings. If you can see the round arch opening, which is distinguished from all the other rectangular openings, marks what is called a mouse hole, a passageway that leads one through a kind of tunnel space to the rear of the property, where residents who lived on the second-story apartments would have stairs to walk up. Americans are not well known for their love of history, but I think more and more people do appreciate cities that have some of their concentrations of older buildings still there.
What kind of an area is the near North Side? It's been called Little America because it is the American melting pot in miniature. There are second to fifth generation Poles, Italians, Germans, some Mexican, Czechs, and Spanish living here.
It was not so long ago when the streets of North St. Louis filled with the sounds and smells of far-off places, when lives were governed by ethnic traditions, when the old world was not so far away. It was a time that some people still remember. Anna Garamella's parents were born in Italy. She and her husband lived on North Market Street.
My mother-in-law, when she come from Italy, people would tell her to go to the downtown on 7th Street. They had the cookie, like Missouri Bakery, and they had all those Italian cookies, Italian food. They had the fish man. Every Thursday he got fresh fish, and people go down there. My mother-in-law come home with fish. She'd make a fish soup or whatever.
Bakeries around here, that was one thing. Bomarito's up here on 19th Street, the White Way Bakery next door here. Italian bakeries, German bakeries, it was all different.
My dad said that, he used to tell me that at one time a lot of the Greeks immigrated through Canada, and then they made their way down to St. Louis, and he said that at any given time you might have anywhere from 8 to 16 Greeks living upstairs, none of them speaking any English. But they all lived up there, in the rooms up there, in the apartments, and then they got jobs, and they learned their English, and they saved some money up. And he says they used to cook some of the, they used to cook goat in the back, they used to roast it, they used to make stews, they used to, they would cook the brains up, and, my dad told me stories about how they'd all be back there, cooking all these exotic foods.
English is the language of commerce now, but German was the language of commerce then at that time. And of course, as time went along, Italian and Polish came in.
For us, it was the Macedonian dialect in the back room. That's where my dad always talked to all his friends in.
It was not just foreign immigrants and their children that came to North St. Louis. The neighborhood attracted African Americans from the rural South who came north in search of jobs and freedom. James Reed, whose parents had moved from Tennessee, grew up on Brooklyn Street.
They had 933 Brooklyn. We lived on the second floor upstairs over the grocery store of Sam LeBeau. We had 1, 2, 3 rooms and a large front porch. It was a huge front porch. I used to get a kick out of that because it was so huge. In the summertime we could sleep out on the front porch, because back then no air. Yeah, I went to Dessalines School. I started in 28 and stayed there until 35. It was a nice brick building, huge. I think I can't remember whether it was 2 floors or 3 floors. And then we had the portables on the side. So some of the boys would, in the wintertime, when the walk would freeze up, they'd slide down there. I was too chicken to do that, so I didn't fool around with that.
Dessalines School is gone now, but when James Reed attended, it was only for African American children. White children went to separate schools. Diversity did not always mean people got along.
When he went to church, to St. Michael's, the kids, the younger generation, would say, "You don't belong in this church." Or they called him Dago. And when you call an Italian that name, it's not a bad name, but you hurt their feelings, And so anyway, my husband could not go to St. Michael's Church. They had to go downtown, Our Lady Help a Christian.
Still, North St. Louis was remembered as a place where the maintenance of traditions eased transition to urban life, and where one could find support and the necessities of life without going far.
Going around selling ice, selling coal, pulled by horses, and then the garbage trucks or garbage wagon were pulled by mules, going up and down the alley to pick up the garbage, and the milk wagon. Sometimes the milkman would have with his milk, he walked so far, and the horse would know when to come up to where he is, So the horse had a little sense.
They had a hardware store every 3-4 blocks, just like bakeries and barbershops. Saloons are every corner. If we have a corner, you have an intersection, you got 4 saloons. That was your social fabric.
I was raised on a farm, southeast Missouri. My husband was a farmer, and he got tired of farming and decided, well, we had friends that was here. The man of the family said to my husband, I've got you a job, come on up, you can go to work. We liked the neighborhood, the children and I, we was never afraid to go out, no matter if it was daytime or nighttime, because there was never anything went on in the neighborhood that we were afraid of. And we could walk up to the Dairy Queen or up to Crown's or to the library or wherever late in the evening and never think a thing about it, or up to 14th Street.
A lot of families occupied the same building, 2, 3 generations, the same building. And that's part of the social and the family fabric that kept things going together too. You have more than one generation living in the building, or at least in the same block. And one generation could depend on the other for help and sickness or child upbringing and like that. It was all part of the family fabric, And that made for a closer community. Changed quite a bit after the war. FHA loans, GI loans, the whole thing. Seeking the little piece of happiness, out there in the hinterlands.
Large homes, big lawns, new schools. These were some of the factors that had people of North St. Louis packing their bags for the suburbs. Yet not all who left did so voluntarily.
It changed an awful lot. A lot of our friends, had to give up their homes because the highway took their homes and they had to move away. So we missed them. The Fox family was one of the families that they were like children of my own, really. 2 boys that was twins, and they spent a lot of time at our house, and they had to give their home up and move, and we missed them. And the highway took several homes down through there.
The effect of the highway in the neighborhood here, when started into the general area here, beginning we came right by Fritz's Tavern there. That was all very solid neighborhood, similar to what you got here, multifamily housing. But that for around here, that just totally escalated the exodus from the area.
And here was a St. Michael's church. But St. Michael's, after that, they never tore any other church down. And we were very disappointed. It was an old church, beautiful inside. Nobody did anything about it, didn't get out and fight anybody for the reason, but that's what they had to do somehow. And the highway's right in the middle of that church.
Totally disrupted the traffic flow, the commerce. It was extremely quiet in business up here because it cut off one segment of our customers from one side to the other side with this new 8-lane wonder down here.
I think most of them, some of them were for it and some was against it, so I guess that's always the way it is, So, but most of the people that had to give up their homes, like on 10th Street there, none of them really wanted to. But the highway bought them out, and they had to get out.
In 1964, President Lyndon Johnson declared a war on poverty. The inner city would become the main battleground. The federal government would provide the funds, and local communities would provide the personnel. Old North St. Louis was declared a model city, a recipient of intensive anti-poverty activity. Despite all the attention and funds, many residents felt the federal programs weren't doing enough to preserve the neighborhood's physical integrity. Absentee landlords let properties deteriorate. Demolition and arson depleted the housing stock. So local activists devised an alternative strategy, one that would safeguard the neighborhood's homes and buildings by highlighting their historic value. In other parts of St. Louis, the historic preservation movement was bringing investment back to the inner city, and on the near north side, people were discovering the beauty and economic advantages of older homes.
A friend of mine who happens to live over on Rauschenbach, which is 3 blocks from here, told me really about the neighborhood, and quite frankly said, boy, you can pick up houses in this neighborhood down here, very, very reasonable. And so, of course, that piqued my interest, and I started coming down and looking at the neighborhood and liked it. And I wanted an all brick building and not have to pay a fortune for it. We moved in September 1979.
In 1981, a group of dedicated homeowners formalized their efforts by organizing the Old North St. Louis Restoration Group. Over the last 2 decades, the Restoration Group has promoted the neighborhood by organizing beautification campaigns, sponsoring house tours, and purchasing endangered homes for resale to rehabbers. As a result of the Restoration Group's hard work, Old North St. Louis has attracted yet another generation of newcomers, young people, not simply content to live in old houses, but eager to fix them up and restore them to their former glory.
I knew I wanted to rehab a house, and this happened to be for sale in a short period of time from the Neighborhood Association, who actually stepped forward to buy it. I just absolutely fell in love with this building. Totally naive about rehabbing buildings, and worked with a bank to get financing on the project, believing that those resources would be adequate in addition to my sweat equity to carrying this thing off, and started work. Replaced almost every single window in this house, replaced doors, relaid walls. It's been a long road. I really love the kind of patina, that many layers of activity. I mean, if you look at the woodwork in this place, I stripped it by hand, and if you look at the floors that remain here, they kind of tell many stories about the people that lived here, and the different scars and so forth. There's something much more gratifying to be connected to that than necessarily living in something that is new and fabricated and doesn't have that all those stories attached to it.
What does it mean to use history as a tool for revitalization? Is it simply a matter of creating a nostalgic ambiance? Or does it require sustaining and building upon traditions of social interaction?
In researching history of the neighborhood, we realized that just going all the way back to the 1800s, how this neighborhood has never lost its diversity. And so we basically, maintain that over the years. So we take pride in that we haven't gone from being a diverse neighborhood to just being middle to upper class folks, That helps with one's thinking when you can, associate with people from all economic backgrounds, and it helps keep one grounded.
We're standing in the heart right now of what would be a 15-acre, 100-unit housing project to build new single-family, market-rate, and affordable townhomes. The new homes will reflect that 19th century character, but that's more about appealing to people's traditional tastes than it is recreating, the nostalgia of what this once was, a place that had segregation and racism. When you talk about putting 100 units of new whatever, you have the opportunity to really nurture that diversity or totally, destroy it. And so, I feel very strongly that, this area has not only the capacity to maintain that diversity, but actually enrich it and make it better.
I still miss my home down there, and it took me years to get used to this one, because down there it was big, tall ceilings and big, tall windows and big rooms, and these were twice as small as theirs were, and I just couldn't get adjusted to it for the longest time.
As an architect, I'm cognizant that, well over 90% of everything that's built in this country is built in greenfield sites. well over. I mean, we are awful about reusing that which we've already made. And, as a society, I mean, you've heard it. It's been said again and again, we are the throwaway society, the ultimate, sort of ultimate of a throwaway society is actually being able to throw away your cities, which, we're doing.
In 1950, the population of St. Louis peaked at 850,000. Today, it approaches the 300,000 mark. As St. Louis emptied out, development sprawled across adjoining counties: St. Louis County, Jefferson County, St. Charles County, Franklin County. Is the process unstoppable? Is it desirable? What is gained and what is lost? Are there alternatives?
You want to live in a place that is real, that isn't invented. It is not to knock the new place. In many ways, that is the history of urbanism in America, leaving the old behind. But it is living in a place that has certain qualities, and those qualities are, a mix of uses, a mix of housing types, a beautiful architecture that, is very real, walkability. I don't know if you've heard, but we've got a great candy store in the middle of the neighborhood, and anywhere you buy a house in this neighborhood, you're only a 5-minute walk away.
There's a lot of old homes, that architecturally significant homes down here that you just don't see in some other neighborhoods.
St. Louis is the city in ruins in a lot of ways. There's something really romantic about that. People pay several dollars to walk around European ruins, the price of admission to get in there. What's romantic about it is imagining that, cities are kind of a continuing process, and so what can be made from this set of ruins or fragments that could be better than what was before.